12th time in my life that all the planning for an institute, when you finally see everybody in front of you, is just a joy, as well as a whew, thank God. I'm Bill Gaventa, and I want to first give a word of thanks to the coordinating council and the younger members who have come in to help with the future of the Institute and to plan. This year took many hands on deck because we had waves that we had to deal with. But I'm just delighted with all of you from Texas who are here today. I want to put in a plug that all you Texans should make sure and stop by and make sure you get one of the brochures for the Texas Faith and Disability Inclusion Network, and go online and sign up. We've had a bunch of people interested in us, but they need to walk down the aisle and become a member. You need to get on the internet and sign up so you can get the emails as we send them out for our monthly Zoom meetings, and because the people will have here today represent some of the kind of creative and wonderful people that we have met around Texas around this. It's a big state for those of you who are not from Texas, as you well may know. It's a state. I live 2 hours south of here in Austin. It takes me 8 hours to drive to El Paso. So you think about that, I could drive from Maine to New Jersey in 8 hours, just about. So anyway, we are delighted to have you here, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome some friends and have them share from what they've done together. I'm going to do a brief introduction, then going to ask them to share a bit more about who they are and what they do in their respective areas of work and ministry and faith supports. The only person tradition we don't have represented here today is a Jewish representative, and there are some creative Jewish programs in Texas, but that just didn't quite work out. But from the end, Suzanne Wilson and Travis Rand are from the Austin area, and they met, and most of your states have this opportunity. They met in the Partners in Policy Making program that are coordinated by the State Developmental Disabilities Councils, which is a 6 or 7, 8 month training program for families, community members, and others to give them the skills to be able to advocate more effectively within the systems in their state. That's where they met. And they helped, then one of their visions was, and they'll tell you more about it, but led to an ABCs of Inclusion conference back in early February in Austin that drew about 120 people to a Presbyterian Church of America in Southwest Austin, which was really good, and it was a terrific conference. Next to them is Dr. Demetrius Smith, who is from the Potter's House, which is a large African-American congregation, not completely, but primarily African-American congregation. Do I have that right? Okay. In the Dallas area, T.J. Jakes, you may have heard of Reverend Jakes. Reverend Dr. Jakes is the senior pastor at that congregation, and she and her assistant, who's here today, run a program on services for some ministries of people with disabilities. Next to her is Esther Garcia, who is from the Dallas area, and she works for the National Catholic Partnership with Disability as their Hispanic coordinator and consultant, working primarily with Hispanic Roman Catholic organizations. And then next to the two of them, first is Zanab Khan, who I just met today for the first time, who's from Houston, running an organization for Muslims around faith and inclusion and spirituality, Dar es Sakina, is that? Dar es Sakina. And next to her is Sharish Shikapuria. Yeah. It's even worse than Gaventa. So, Sharice is just finished a PhD program at Texas A&M in special ed. She is headed to the University of Maryland as a professor, and her name burst upon the scene when a couple of years ago the AAIDD did a webinar on the role of the faith community in transition for young adults with intellectual disabilities, and I thought, who is this? And it was a terrific webinar, and we're just delighted to have her here today. So I'm going to go in opposite direction this time and ask you to just say a little bit about what you've done. We'll keep this fairly short, and then we'll get to responding to Eric and the conversations and who you are. It should be on. Try it.
Okay. Hi. Is it on? Okay. Hi, my name is Serish. I work in the areas of faith and disability, particularly for Muslim South Asian families of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, particularly trying to demystify this process of what it takes for individuals to feel a sense of belonging and inclusion within their mosque spaces. And if it's not within the mosques, then where can we build more support for Muslim families outside of the traditional mosque spaces as well?
I think this one works. All right. Hi, you guys. My name is Zainab. I am the program director at Darus Sakina. You guys actually have our brochures and our handouts on your table right now. So we are a nonprofit in the greater Houston area that serves Muslim families with disabilities. And our entire idea is that it's important not only to serve the individual with a disability, but the entire family unit within itself. So we're really, really careful and mindful about the way that we interact both with individuals with disabilities, but also in the ways that we support their caregivers through mental health programs, through events and other resources.
As the director of Outreach and Diocese Relations, I work with all the dioceses across the United States to ensure persons with disabilities can be meaningful participate in the parish. Our job is to ensure we accompany the diocese who need resources, provide different content, diverse content. But as a Hispanic, I also have the pleasure to accompany the Hispanic community. I also volunteer in my parish and my diocese and with my community because this ministry goes beyond. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, I am so excited to be here today. This power in the room is just, it's like an IV infusion, I was telling everyone. We serve individuals with disabilities of all ages, all conditions, all cognitions, all communication styles, all mobility styles, not only in the DFW area at our home church, but on our 4 other church locations. We also serve individuals nationally with a database of over 7,000 families that we help find resources for where they live, whether the resources are for school, access to care, education, transportation, and housing. We recently launched IDD TV, which is our opportunity to share information about disabilities, but also to have programming to, for, by, and with individuals that have the opportunity to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, having conversations that are meaningful to them. And next year, we're launching IDD University so that individuals post-high school don't fall into a black hole, experience extreme skills regression, have the opportunity to not only go to college, receive a certification, but utilize those adult living skills that are very important to them. So there are a lot of things that we're doing, and I'm excited to be here to join the conversation.
And I am a self-advocate from Austin, and I have put on a conference with Suzanne about preschool inclusion.
My name is Suzanne Wilson. Travis and I met, as Bill said, at Partners in Policy Making in a class. I am mom to 3. My middle son is Jack, and he's 15 and has Down syndrome. I was excited in my Partners in Policy Making class to be associated in kind of a similar group like this, just with people who care about similar issues, to connect that way. And then I was also interested in meeting more peers with disabilities. And so I was really glad to meet Travis. We found out that we had a shared faith background and care about children and their inclusion. And so we kind of began this journey of seeing where it would be. We interviewed several expert practitioners around the Austin area who are already doing like a reverse inclusion preschool model, and then learned from them and hosted a conference, back in February. And so it was a wonderful way to hopefully take faith-based congregations who might have preschools and also community development centers, other places working with children who might have a desire to include kids with disabilities, but might not have had the skill set or know how to introduce them and connect them to resources in the community to help take the next step in being more inclusive. We also partnered with a congregation who's been doing disability ministry for some time to have them as a presenter as well, so that they could speak to children's ministers and other people working with young children in the community and help equip them.
So I'm going to start off with Travis. And for all of you, the question is, what kinds of issues or questions or things that you had in response to Eric's presentation that you thought were really important? And secret, they had access to the presentation before the conference, so.
What stuck out for me is the churches in Wyoming, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania offering special services like transportation and a medical library for their congregants. My favorite is the medical library in Tennessee because I feel like this is an awesome example of serving our neighbors.
Anything else at the moment? No. Okay. Demetrius?
I really can't wait to talk to Eric. I took so many notes. One of the things that stood out to me, I love the transition from inclusion to belonging and kind of how we're taking that journey. And so one of the things I wanted to ask is, how do we move from either of those to engagement? And is that something that we need, and what does engagement look like? And what does it mean to really belong?
I'm going to let you all start jumping in if you want to. So, Esther, if you want.
Yes, for me, what really struck me, take my attention is, I think we had to really go in action, because we see it's integration, we see segregation in all communities. So I think it's we as students or as children or youth, adults, we learn from one another. And I think we're missing that part. I think we say, why we have a lot of, races, or we have some, we don't violence. It's because we segregate our community. We have one here and one over there. We have to learn each other, love each other, and the only way is when we are together. We know some persons with different disabilities can be integrated or can be full inclusion, but at least we have to find ways to ensure they feel loved and feel part of the community, and it's what we're missing. I think what I appreciate for all this conversation in the morning and the numbers is just to do one action in my parish. So do something in the parish, and that will multiply the gifts of God.
Definitely, I agree. Just like one small action makes such a big difference. And I think for me, that's really what stood out in the presentation, was the fact that all of these faith-based organizations were trying different ways to support their community and different ways to be there for their community. And I think that's incredibly important. A lot of the times, the idea is, okay, let's make sure that we can get like the conversation of disability in this space. Let's make sure like, you know, that they're being represented in this organization. Let's make sure that we're thinking about ways to include them. But I think one thing that is really important for us to focus on is how we make our community want to do this, right? Outside of the individuals that have disabilities, how do you get your community engaged? How do you get them to want these programs, right? For me personally, one of the ways that we have been incredibly successful is we've been working with the youth and getting the youth involved in programs, giving them volunteer opportunities that are a lot of fun and really engaging. And in turn, I've seen these youth like become advocates. Like they're the ones coming up to me when I'm doing events. They're the ones that are kind of shaping the conversation. Like, oh, why don't we have this space available for these individuals? Oh, well, why aren't they at that event? And I think that's something that's incredibly important in this conversation is how do we make sure that we're making sure that people understand the weight of like their words, the weight of their actions, and how important it is to use those to help other individuals.
Yeah, Dr. Carter shared some incredible insight this morning, and it made me think about two specific things. One thing was I've seen this in the Muslim community, especially, as well as this bottom-up approach, where a lot of the movement comes from the parents and the individuals themselves, and less from the clergy or the people at the top. But this brings me back to the conversation of when we're trying to have inclusive peer friendships. The conversation now is there a specialized training needed for the peers, or do we need specialized training, or is it just being kind to one another, engaging in reciprocity and things like that? Similar to that, it makes me wonder, is there a necessity for specialized training for clergy? Should they be responding to the needs and desires of our congregational members, of individuals with disabilities, in a similar manner as they do to the rest of the congregation? Are there special skill sets needed? And if so, what are they in terms of the context that is provided, or is it in terms of the actions that they actually do? And it's something I'm continuing to sort of think about now. And then the second thing is, like Zainab said, I think, how do we prioritize individuals with disabilities within our spaces? I think for us, it's, I've seen people say, we don't have people with disabilities in our mosque. That's a common thing I hear. Or another common perspective is that, would including one person in a specific prayer lead to exclusion of 150 other members because they might be not happy with that? That's honest to God. I've heard these things and I've dealt with them, and it makes me think about, again, like Zainab said, what is the motivating factor? Does it come from scripture? Does it come from our actions? Does it come from the community as a whole? And it just continues to make me think about prioritizing the needs, the desires, and the spaces for individuals with disabilities across the board. And one thing that we've done, especially in my mosque, is we have like different webinars, let's say for educational approaches, or we have a webinar for women's health or mental health or things like that, and it's integrating experiences and expectations and desires of individuals with disabilities within that. So like when we do a college framework, now we started to talk about inclusive post-secondary education programs, just as like a filter to send the message across to all parents, even if they don't come in and ask us for these support needs and things like that.
It reminds me, in New Jersey, there was a large Islamic center that tried to offer some programs and opportunities for families with disabled kids to come and talk together and think together. And very few people showed up. Then they decided, we'll offer an educational series on dealing with challenging behaviors. And they had a ton of people show up, including families with kids with disabilities, in terms of, so when you start thinking about how positive behavior supports and things like that go across, it's not just sort of that kind of thing. You can think about it if you offered a thing for a church about how do your kids deal with stigma of, any kind of thing like that, that lots of people, not just people with disabilities, would show up. So you all, if you've heard each other, what kinds of things are going on in your mind? And don't be shy, because I know none of you are shy in real life, so.
I want to go back to actually Sarash's point and how you talked about how it's so important for the clergy to be aware. I 100% would agree. Through the work that I've done, every year Dara Sakina hosts an annual disability awareness conference. And we usually like reach out to scholars within the Muslim community, and we ask them to speak about like faith and disability and how it, works within our religion. And 9 times out of 10, like, we're working with those scholars, and as soon as we explain, like, hey, this is a need, like, they're like, oh my God, yes, it is. Yes, like, why haven't we been doing this? Like, wait, this is amazing. Like, what? Like, every single time I've had a conversation with anyone who's been a part of like a mosque board, or have been a part of like writing like interpretation of Islamic theology, it's just having that conversation and reminding them like, hey, my community exists. This is not my community, this is your community. These are your people, these are your neighbors, these are your family members. And just reminding them that, we're here and we deserve to be here. And I think that's incredibly important for the clergy to know that. Because it shifts the perspective of the congregation. Like, what they say makes a really big difference in the way that your congregation thinks. So it is so incredibly important to have these conversations, I believe, with your clergy.
And I always believe there is education is key in everything, and education information, not just for the people working with ministry, persons with disabilities, but also for the rest of the community. It is 80%, 90%. They need to know that when they're missing one person with disability, they're missing the part of the face of Christ. And my son, he's an excellent lector, but now I have to work with my pastor to ensure there is a training. I will provide the training, safe environment training. I will provide the safe environment training, but we want to ensure he has the same opportunities that everybody else. And if I have a son in that circumstances, I know there is many people in the same. So we have to ensure we provide those formations and trainings so everybody can be meaningful and agents of catechesis and agents of evangelization, especially the adult ones, the ones with different and several disabilities, the adults. I just love to ensure we have some formation, education, training, accompaniment, activities for those adults. They have many things to bring, many treasures to bring, but I don't see that. So I think it's my second activity in my parish.
Susan?
To say, I'll keep speaking. I think as a parent, and then I'm struck between kind of this, I think what you were talking about, Dr. Carter, of like the welcome that in accelerating work of churches, and yet also kind of there's still work to do. And just stepping into the space, I feel like I'm kind of an inclusion nut in special education for my kiddo, and church feels kind of like a newer space for that conversation to happen. I've found, thankfully, interested clergy or staff members who are kind of willing to kind of take the next step in some ways, but it's not real formalized, and it's kind of ad hoc and happening as it goes along. So like for me, I feel like my education has come around through like the Down Syndrome Association, Partners in Policy Making. Like I've kind of been able to follow like disability leadership through these outside organizations. And yet I guess there's an openness. And then as a parent, I think there's just this tension of being a leader and then also being a recipient of ministry myself, because I need the ministry to me. I'm seeking it on behalf of my child, but I also just need the ministry to me. So I'm kind of trying to thread that needle and trying to figure out how to enter into conversations. But I will say, just personally, I feel like God really used this journey with Travis to help just in my personal journey with disability, and even in my faith journey. Disability can sometimes be an isolating experience. You feel like you're figuring it out on your own or in these different pockets. And as a person whose faith is very important to them, it was just amazing to see what God provided as we went along the journey, and different challenges that came up that, were solved and ended up happening at my home church, which was a last-minute result as of an ice storm in Austin, that we ended up there literally within 24 hours. But God provided that, and I think he was like, you need to be at your home church. So, these kind of different things that happened. Travis was the one always asking the questions like, why don't we ask Dr. Carter to come to our conference? And I was like, but he lives in Tennessee. And we reached out and he goes, well, I'm moving to Waco. So, all these things happen. And it was kind of just a wonderful, I guess, example of, that God cares. And seeing that personally was really just a ministry to me. So anyway, I'm just really grateful that we got to partner on that.
Just to the coordinating committee here, be grateful that we didn't have a hailstorm yesterday and have to move the whole location of the conference in 24 hours. There are problems, and then there are problems. Travis, you have a comments? Not right now? Okay.
I'd like to ask something or share. You mentioned the parent support and the feelings vacillate between feeling supported and then feeling isolated at times too. That's something I noticed a lot as well, is that the parents really felt that they needed a support system, individuals who shared their beliefs or their cultures and really understood the realities of having a child with a disability. And so we started forming a group that kind of took off ad hoc, and then it ended up being like 140 parents that decided to just join, and they would text each other. I'm on that group, and they talk about all sorts of wonderful things and crazy things and, fun things. But we realized that they really needed a social support, and oftentimes that didn't come from just being there in person, because even when they were at the mosque, they were surrounded by other people and they couldn't have those intimate conversations that they were able to if they were just on a group chat. And they would bring in speakers on their own, and then now they're talking about the food that their kid hates and all of that stuff. And so maybe there's something there too. I don't know if you guys are offering a social space in your own context and what that may look like, and if there's an opportunity to invest in that.
Is Heather West here today? Raise your hand. No, okay. She's not far away in Temple, and we had her on one of our monthly Zoom things recently and what she taught, I was so impressed with is exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, where the ways in which their church tried to quietly support families without making a big deal of it. And, and just support, like you talked about, Eric, between Sundays or between Fridays or however you might want to say that. And just how those kinds of quiet supports were really kind of crucial and important in different ways.
We found that as well. We do weekly touch bases, and we set 10 families each week that we're going to call. What's going on? How are you doing? What are your needs this week? And so we try to help them with answering those IEP questions, access to care, what's happening around your house that's not being addressed. And so they look forward to that now. And one of the ways that we started to change that and make it sort of in our culture is training our leaders and our volunteers so that everyone is prepared to respond, whatever that response needs to be, even if it's asking a question. And then I think so many people are afraid of messing up. Like, I don't want to mess up. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know what to do. But humanity and respect knows no boundaries. And so it's just about starting with respect, greeting everyone, talking to everyone. Even if they don't understand or can't respond, they deserve that respect. And that's the first part of changing the inclusive culture. So I'm excited about that.
I just want to add that we work with ministry leaders, diocese directors across the United States, and they work isolate too, and they have many hats besides, because they do faith formation, they do 2 or 3 ministries and disability. So we have a communication with our diocese directors to accompany them and support them with resources they need, because whatever need Washington D.C., not the same from Orange, California, or Dallas, Texas, and we work with different levels and supports. We want to ensure they have our accompaniment and resources they need for their parishes and their communities. I think that it's very important to ensure ministry leaders are also mental health and accompaniment and working with them. They have many hats and they work excellent, so to ensure.
I kind of wanted to go back to your point about how you were talking about trainings within the community. I think that is so incredibly essential. Um, the way that I have seen the effect of being able to talk to community members, explain disability to them, and then see them interact has been amazing. So I run a program called the Volunteer Enrichment Program, and essentially I gather high school students and middle school students in the Houston area, and I hold a disability awareness training for them. And in that training, I tell them, like, ask me your questions about disability. Ask me the things that, like, you're afraid to talk about. There is nothing that you can ask me that I'll get offended. Like, I'm here to teach you. I'm here to have this conversation with you. I involve usually like an RBT or a speech pathologist in this conversation as well. And I tell the kids that if you don't learn anything from this training, the only thing I want you guys to take away from this is that these are individuals just like you, just like me. They have thoughts and feelings just like you and just like me. And for me personally, I have seen these kids go from not acknowledging individuals with disabilities in the mosque space to being their best friend. I've had parents tell me, like, hey, I've known this kid since he was 7 years old. He's known my child since they were 7. He has never spoken to him, and now he went through your training and they're best friends. Every single family event that I see this kid at, he is playing with my child. He's there with my child. He's not judging my child, and my child's excited. Like, he doesn't want to sit on his iPad anymore. He wants to interact and he wants to be included. So it's really, really important, making sure that your congregation is mindful, making sure that your community is mindful about this. And it isn't something that's difficult. It can be as easily as hosting some type of training and being like, hey guys, let's talk about disability. Ask me your questions, like, what is that stimming thing in autism, right? And I'll sometimes even show them what a stim looks like, and I'll be like, I know you guys wanna laugh right now, but don't do it again. And I explain to them, like, the way that their body language makes such a big difference. And I mean, the friendships that I've seen have been absolutely amazing. So I definitely agree with that point.
Building that confidence.
Yeah.
There's an organization called To Be Like Me. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but they offer field trips to schools, and they have different classrooms, and every person in each classroom has a specific disability, and the kids go from room to room talking to the individual, learning about their disability from the person themselves. So they say, ask me your questions, let me help you understand me, and so you feel more comfortable with me, and it's building those relationships very well.
Kind of think, your thing about training and helping people to get over this. I don't want to say anything that's going to be wrong. It's a particular kind of barrier, I think, in faith communities, because people want to be helpful, but they don't know how, and don't know if they don't want to say. They get caught up, I think, sometimes in, well, I don't want to make their disability worse or whatever, which, ironically, not saying anything makes it worse, at all. And I think it's one place, especially for clergy and others, where we have to deal with the fact that that people who work in the disability arena have sometimes trained the public to think you have to have special kinds of skills to interact with people with disabilities. And so at least part of my thing over the time is to say to pastors, you've got the skills. Families, those people want just what you give to other people. It's going to might come in a different kind of conversation and so on, but you don't have to go to seminary or do a whole course with Eric Carter or Bill Gaventa to do this. It's people yearn to have that same kind of interaction and relationship with you and other members of the congregation just like anybody else. So it's trying to help them see that they've already got the capacity and power if they would just be more open to that. Yeah.
We start there, we got it whipped. Yeah.
Travis, got a comment? I can't see if you've got the mic in your hand or whatever. Okay. So for you all, and you said a little bit about what you're all doing. What do you see as the kind of cutting edge, the next things you're trying to think about doing? I mean, ITD University and TV, that's quite a thing. But I wonder what some of you see as kind of the next kinds of growing edges for you in what you're trying to do. Suzanne?
I'll
Susan?
start. I mean, again, I'm just a parent here kind of doing my thing with
There's no such thing
with
as just a
experts
parent here,
around me.
sorry.
But I think for me, a powerful learning through my partnership with Travis and then what I'm seeing for my son is just the idea of collaboration and partnership for people with and without disabilities coming together. And I got to see this through a church member, actually. My son ended up co-designing a fort that was showcased in a very prominent space in Austin at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. He was the first teenager to help design a fort, but he did it with this church architect who saw in his drawings and that were just kind of 3D shapes that he was drawing and showed him some other architectural things that he was reminded of in looking at my son's drawings, and they worked on SketchUp together, and then they did like some collaboration with his team, and a friend of ours who's a builder in Austin who has a son with Down syndrome helped this thing come to life. And so I think like that's powerful support to me. I also just had witness in my church community through that partnership of when my son was walking through the Wildflower Center and just kind of did a stop and drop. He doesn't really do that much anymore, but he kind of just sat down and it's like, what's going through his mind? Well, I had someone kind of witness patiently our process of just kind of going through that and getting back up and moving along. And that's just powerful. And then as I kind of said earlier, I think just in partnering with Travis, there's just been a lot of learnings for me, and I've been really grateful for that. So I'm curious, like where I see, for example, my son's, I think, going to be involved in Best Buddies going forward. Like I'm noticing their leadership only has like some roles for kids with disabilities and some without. I'm like, why aren't they like doing co-president, co-vice president? You know, like I'm curious about how to see those things happen, because I think it's a powerful model in the faith communities too, just the one anothering and yeah, I feel like it's a good model for everyone, right? And just personally, that there's so much that comes from it too.
As I said before, I really love that a church has the medical equipment, and I pray that this will inspire other churches to do the same. I also love how churches are going out of their way to send families to summer camp and offering transportation.
I think one of the things that you're getting at, Susan, in relation to this is, I think as we think about inclusion and then moving to belonging, the huge importance of the kind of co-leadership and inviting people into leadership spaces and really listening. There are two people who are involved in the Institute this week whose books are related to that both Naomi Jacobs and then on Thursday, Aaron Rafferty, whose books are out there, who did ethnographic studies with people in faith communities talking about their inclusion and belonging. And what they talked about is people can get really enthusiastic about this, but then when it gets down to the everyday details, it means maybe changing some practices. I was talking with my friend, longtime friend Hans yesterday. It's like we've helped people say, we want you to come and belong in our space and adapt to be included in our space. Now, how do we adapt to your space? You know, how do your needs and your preferences help? What kind of challenge maybe to the way things go as usual around here that need changing? And that's kind of hard, specific work at times because, as all of you know, at least I think in most faith traditions, change doesn't come easily sometimes. Or not do, what's the old saying about the 7 last words of the church? We never did it that way before. Working on things like that. Other people about cutting edges, where you see things going.
I'll add something. We take an approach with each family, 3 areas. Can we help them be effective in the workplace, more effective in the family, or more effective in the community? And those kind of underlie all of our programming and all of our support to Dr. Carter's statement about, when the benediction is over, what are you doing for the family? And so we just take it on an individual basis. Some people are, able to take advantage of all three areas. Effective in the workplace, effective in the family. What does that look like, And we encourage families to, get individuals from behind the TV tray with the remote control and the fish sticks and put them at the front door, have them greet the family at Thanksgiving. So more family engagement, more conversation to them, not about them or at them. And then effective in the workplace, that, independent living skills and more opportunities to get out in the community.
All right. Anybody else got a burning thing? Oh, you, sorry, I didn't see that.
I can definitely add to the cutting where I
Go,
see
go,
it
go,
going.
go.
I see it really going towards focusing on three things. These are the three things that my organization goes by. It's inclusion, so including, right? Including individuals with disabilities in our community, including them in our faith spaces. When there's talks, when there's lectures, there's like an event going on, a celebration, making sure there's accommodations for them. Then I see the next step is empowerment, right? Making sure that these parents that, maybe have just gotten a disability diagnosis, or maybe they've had it their entire lives, but no one's really explained what it means to them, they have the resources that they need, right? So educating ourselves about what resources are available, like what they're legally entitled to by the government, what are they entitled to by their community, what free resources are available, things like that. And then lastly, to inspire our community, right? Like what is our community gonna do to keep this work going when we're gone? When we're not the ones pushing the envelope, when we're not the ones saying, why isn't this event happening? What are we doing to make sure that our community themselves is empowered and inspired to do this work?
Esther?
Yes, one last thing. We know the numbers 136 for autism, and we know the numbers, the second is the Hispanic one. So we have to ensure when we offer resources and accompaniment to the families, we also see the diversity, because the first is the Asian, the second is the Hispanic. So we have to ensure we're serving and we prepare our ministry leaders to have these tools, more visuals, more first then, because our person with disabilities or person with autism, we're gonna need it. So we have to ensure, provide those resources and trainings for the community. And also, our persons with disabilities, they feel so lonely. And I didn't feel that. I was raised in the church, and I feel the love of my community. I want the same for my son and for everybody to feel. I think we as a community, we have to offer them, and now they feel so isolated. Even they feel mental health or mental illness because they feel depression and anxiety, because they don't feel the support of the community. Or you have to go to 30 minutes driving to find a church that opens the doors to you. And it has to be your own church from your own community. I think it's a more loving community.
I
It's
agree.
important.
It's so important to have community support. Like I've seen it firsthand. Like parents have literally broken down in front of me because they feel like they're alone, because they feel like no one understands, because everyone's telling them that the reason that their child has a disability is a punishment. And until we're able to show those parents we're here for you, there are other people that understand, and until we're able to connect them with someone who actually understands, it doesn't make a big difference. But once they talk to someone like, hey, you've actually gone through this. Oh, I've gone through this as well. Okay, what did you do? Oh, this is what I did. The amount of power that I've seen these parents have and the amount of hope that they develop through this has been incredible. So going back to having support programs, having support groups, I run one of our support groups. We have a Power Moms group. Essentially, it's all of the moms that we work with in our organization, and 95% of the time, they answer each other's questions. Their question is like, okay, my kid won't go to the dentist. Is there a dentist that will help with my child? Okay, I just came back from my meeting. My IEP says this, but I disagree with my teacher. What can I do? And before me even having to get involved, these parents are there. They're like, okay, well, I did this. Okay, well, I think you should do this. Okay, when I spoke to my speech pathologist, she told me this. And they use that platform as a space to kind of take care of themselves and reduce that isolation. And they actually become also, I guess, partners for change, because I've seen those moms then go out into the community and be like, well, we deserve to be here. Well, we're gonna be here. Well, we're hosting this event. You guys are gonna and they become unapologetic with their inclusion and unapologetic in their belonging in the community. And I think that's incredibly important. So these support groups, support programs, any way of communicating, any way of reducing isolation makes an incredible difference, I would say.
That's quite a transition from punishing to unapologetic. Susan?
I might jump in, kind of on this idea of support. Something that's cutting edge in our family personally is I would love churches to kind of embrace an idea of helping families develop personal support networks. And that's something I'm hoping for my child, kind of like a personal board of directors, or hopefully it would consist of some high schoolers, maybe a coach or youth director, kind of coming together to think through his goals from kind of that person-centered planning idea. I'm kind of trying to cook this up and get it going. So if anyone has any of that going on, come talk to me about it, because I'm super interested in figuring it out. But I feel like that's a real possibility within congregations, because there's so many different people there, right? Not that it all has to come from church, but it certainly should be a valued component in a creative partnership. And so anyway, that's something
Have I got a resource for you? The Mennonites did a while ago a little booklet called Supportive Care in the Congregation, which is about creating circles of support around a family or an individual. So you got to come in.
As a sibling, I think siblings are a huge untapped group, and I think if we are able to offer a space for them to decompress and understand things and have them sort of lead the charge as peers, I think that could be really instrumental in moving some of these things along as well. So I know DUS does a really good job of keeping their siblings and giving them space to talk about things as well. So.
All right, so go. Sorry, continue.
And dad support groups as well. We saw a lot of broken families and a lot of fathers who had left the home because they couldn't fix it. And so we helped them to understand that it wasn't something you all did wrong at home. You didn't take the wrong vitamin, you didn't get the wrong thing. And so a lot of our families were mended because there was an understanding, and we created a dad cave where dads have a chance to talk with other dads and tell them things they won't tell anyone else.
A dad cave. What a cool idea. Cool. All right, Sanab, you said something about your three things: inclusion, empowerment, and inspire, to help other people. So after you're not around, what inspires each of you? Where do you get your hope from about this, and what kind of keeps you going?
For me personally, what inspires me to continue the work that I do is the effect that I've seen, like me doing the smallest thing, creating a WhatsApp group for these moms to talk, has had such a big impact. That's where, or me just having a conversation with one of these moms, or asking them how their day is, and just being there on a human level for them, the impact that I've seen that this has on these families, the impact that it has on their psyche, the impact that it has on the way that they take care of their kids, on the way that their relationship with God, on the way that they view the world, has been incredibly humbling. I've had parents tear up. I've had parents cry in my arms. I've had to take parents to calm down. But just being there for them and supporting them, the amount of peace that I feel, it's my happy place. I honestly feel there's a saying that we have in my religion, Islam. We consider individuals with disabilities the people of heaven. And so we call them the inhabitants of Jannah, which is what we call heaven. And I truly see these people as the inhabitants of heaven because of the peace and the calm and the hope that they give me every day.
For me, I love being in church and in ministry, and I think my son is a gift for me because I learned so much on disability thanks to him and serving others. But I think it's when I see a parent and I can help and I can guide and I can support, it's just, you make the difference in education. When you use different methodologies, different ways of teaching or prayer, and one of them may click to the person, it just make the difference. And I just always believe that we can do the difference in a little space, in a bigger space. And I feel so happy to do it. I just have this ministry, and it's my passion being catechist, and now embracing disabilities is just to ensure that everybody deserves the same opportunity, the same education, and I do my part, and I feel well that I do my part as a person.
For me, I guess I would just say drawing strength from companionship, I think from other families, thought leaders, just kind of helps continue to drive things forward. And then just the call of the church to do right and to love and to walk in mercy, all those good things, kind of keeps the North Star going forward. And yeah.
What inspires me is that I spent the first 7 years of my life reading lips and using sign language. I didn't speak my first word until I was 8 years old. And even now I read lips because I was diagnosed as mentally retarded. I couldn't hear when I was born. I was born without an eardrum in both ears and a deformed one in my right ear. And so I spent my life hiding, trying to be accepted. And miraculously, I had an exploratory surgery. I gained speech. And so I don't do things for the community. I am the community. And I'm inspired because I thought I was going to be doing something else with my life. But to be walking in my purpose, I was adopted into a family with 4 individuals with cerebral palsy. And I watched my grandmother take care of my aunts all my life. So she was giving me the blueprint. And then I got a call one day to interview for a job for an IDD outreach. And I thought, I just got a promotion. I can't go anywhere right now. I just got a raise. And to walk away from all of that and walking to a place where I could create programs for people like me. And so I'm inspired every day to make the difference for people like me.
Part of our challenge is to help the rest of our faith community see it's people like all of us, or that they're the same as well. Will you help me by giving this group of Texans a nice applause? My backup plan was if the conversation slowed, I was going to give you time to ask questions, but this is what I really hoped would happen. You know who they are. They're here the rest of the day. So if some of you would like to talk with them individually, I'm sure they would welcome it today. And I just want to thank you all for wonderful contributions to this panel and to being who you are and what you do. It's amazing to me always how the questions and the issues are the same in each tradition, and we have to learn to apply our own ways of working with that and drawing upon that tradition to move that forward. So thank you very much, and Shelley, there are probably instructions for lunch.